Hello my lovelies, welcome to my little cottage by the sea, the place where I love to stitch and craft my way to a vintage inspired and sustainable lifestyle. I went thrifting and I have got a thrift haul for you today. Some of the things that I want to share with you today are in Le Sac, and there are a couple of other things that I've just found on rather sparse thrifting trips over the last few weeks. So let's let the cat out of the bag and I'll show you my treasure. The first thing that I got, no surprise, is some fabric. I went to St Leonard's, which is the town immediately adjoining Hastings, for a jumble sale basically at St Michael's Hospice, which is a charity that does so much good work here and in the environs. But there's also a shop called Nomad, which is basically sort of ends of run, offcuts, bits and pieces of fabric. So it's a sustainable fabric shop, but it's kind of like vintage, but it's not all vintage, and you can buy all sorts of goodies in there. So I got this really beautiful fabric. There's 2.8 meters by 110, vintage, unknown composition, and it was £15. But isn't it incredibly beautiful? I think I'm going to make just a dirndl skirt out of that at some point for summer. I also picked up these buttons. They're glass faux jet, very twinkly. They're quite heavy and they are probably late Victorian, maybe Art Deco-y, 1920s-ish, something like that. I also got from Nomad some little pieces, scrap busting pieces. These were in a big bag out the front of the shop saying help yourself. I did double check and I got this lovely tweed and then this sort of berry chintz and this little scrap of silk dupion, sort of periwinkle colour. These are all for my sort of little creatures embroidered taxidermy, which I've been doing, and I have an exhibition. And then this, I think I'm gonna make a hood of some kind. I might get that Merchant and Mills hood, can't remember what it's called, but try that out. I am experimenting with colour, so you can't go wrong with a free little bit of something to do a bit of experimenting with. Then all these next things were from the St Michael's Hospice jumble sale, and everything was £1 each, so I had a wonderful time, other than there are some crafty bits and they were 50p each. But anyway, so the first thing that I picked up was this tweed wool jacket. It's a St Michael pure new wool. St Michael is Marks and Spankers, Marks and Spencers, so I can't say that word. It's got lovely little pocket. It's really beautifully made. It's got an internal pocket. It's a man's jacket, but £1. So very, very pleased with that. Might have to do some kind of fitting with it. I actually haven't tried any of these on. This next thing's a bit bizarre, but I promise you they're not in a packet, but they were new. There's some wool tights. So I like tights to either be cobwebby fishnet or to look like a nun's. And these are very Call Your Midwife nun's tights. They're really beautifully made. Look, they're like that. So they are new. I promise you they are new, but they just were not in a packet. So I got those as well. And I think they're sort of, would you call those fully fashioned? I'm not entirely sure, but those, can squirrel those away for next winter. And then I got another jacket, this jacket here, sort of a zoot suit jacket. It's a little bit crazy. Not really sure where it's from. The brand says Zeki. And I'm thinking that with this sort of collar, it looks quite 40s. I'm doing a lot of work around Hedy Lamarr at the moment, my all-time favourite muse. And I thought this would be a really, really good piece to sort of fit and get that sort of fitted shape, because it's not fitted at all. It's actually sort of double-breasted. But a change of buttons, a little bit of fitting, maybe some sort of shaping in the shoulders will get me that sort of 1940s look. Then I found these shoes, these Jones bootmaker shoes, which is quite a sort of good brand here in the UK, and not worn, sort of 40s-y, 60s-y, not really sure. They're my size. I haven't tried them on. Still got their doodah that was holding them together, but very fab. They're leather. They were £1. So even if any of these things don't fit or aren't suitable, I've sort of made a charitable contribution, and then I can just sort of give them to a charity shop to sell on. So, you know, it's a bit of a win-win really. The first things I found actually, and I was so pleased to find, were these leather belts. So in my things that I'd like to make this year, one of them was actually a leather belt, the Lena Hoshek leather belt. Now, I want the belt. I don't really want to start learning leather craft. I'm not particularly interested in picking up that skill set, but I really wanted to make the belt. And I found a black leather belt and a brown, like tobacco-y brown, which I really like, that sort of tobacco-y brown. Never really been into browns before, but tweeds, tobacco browns, quite liking those at the moment. That one's a Marks and Spankers one. Not really sure where that one's from, but they were £1 each. They're in really good condition. They're exactly the right sort of style for that belt, and I thought I could just get the little bits and kind of add them on. I could sort of zhuzh them up a bit, revamp them a little bit. So very, very pleased to have both of those. And then I found this scarf, a sort of paisley scarf. It's not particularly lovely fabric, but I just thought that a scarf is always so useful, isn't it? So I'm looking forward to putting this turban style on my head and making all my hair go static, because it's one of those that it will crackle. But I thought it was really nice, vibrant colour. It was really very cheering to look at. So looking forward to doing something with that. Then the last few things were these little crafty bits. So I got a couple of skeins of this really beautiful, I think it's alpaca, and it's like an Aran wool. I'm not sure what weight these are. These were £1 together. And then some Schiaparelli shocking pink velvet ribbon trim. There's apparently 5 yards of that, so that's always useful. And then this little lace doodah here, which a yoke, I suppose you would call it, more than a collar, that you can do something with. I thought that was pretty. They had loads of those. That was 50p. And then still in its packet, but this basically it's like a little clasp with these big pearly whatsits on. And actually I think they sold a load of the chains there, and I didn't buy the chain to go with it, which I probably should have done, but there we go, wrangled that out. So you make your own little pretty bag with that little clasp. That was only 50p as well. It's ever so pretty. All the sort of carving on that metal, moulding on the metal. Not really doing a very good job of showing you. And the pearls, love a pearl. So those were all my goodies from St Leonard's. And then I've got a few more things to show you, which I've just been finding here and there over the last couple of weeks. I think this has to be one of my favourite things that I've found. It's this wonderful painted picture frame, just there, of a little Jack Russell-y type dog. And I thought I would get a picture of Ghost, get a photograph of Ghost and put that in. There was something that sort of amused me somewhat about that idea. But how fab is that little picture frame? I've been looking for quite a long time for these spoons that I remember my great aunt using that had holes in them. And of course you go into shops and say, have you got any spoons, decorative antique spoons with holes in? Everybody looks at you like you've absolutely lost the plot. But I remember them being a thing, and I'm sure I remember them being sugar sifters, because before we got sugar that was so processed and chemically processed so that it was free pouring, sugar used to be quite lumpy, and you would have these spoons to be able to sift your sugar. And I wanted one of these so that you could get things like olives out of jars easily, because you just for whatever reason, they're quite difficult to get out of jars. I find it anyway. Maybe it's just one of my difficulties and I may be alone. But I found a really pretty little spoon. So they look like this. And they do exist. I'm not insane. So I've got that. The one thing is though, that the handle, I was going to say stem, the handle not quite long enough, and actually it's got quite a bowl on here, but you would put your sugar in there and just zhuzh it through into your tea or coffee. But very, very pretty, very pleased to have that anyway, even if I don't use it. It's decorative enough to be pleasing to the eye, therefore useful. And I also found a little dish here. This is the Marlowe by Minton, and I have a teacup and saucer, a couple of teacups and saucers, and I always look out for this particular china when I'm on my treasure hunting. Don't often see it actually, but I'm trying to sort of build up a little bit more of a whole tea set. So very pleased to have this, completely pointless. I think it's like a little trinket dish. I'm probably just going to use it as a spoon rest or to put the tea bag in or something when I have my little tea parties, or maybe a little saucer so that Ghost can have some milk in it. My final treasure in this Spring Thrift Haul is this little jar, and I think it used to have some kind of lid on it. I've got my very decorative dried roses in it at the moment. How attractive. But I thought it was so pretty because it reminded me of Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast, which is a much loved film, the live action one particularly. And yeah, what better vessel to put one's roses in to dry than this. I think this was £1 from somewhere. Very, very pleased with all of these. I'm sure you'll be seeing some, if not all of them, in upcoming videos where I style things and carry on working on my dining room. So I hope you've enjoyed having a little look at some of these treasures that I found in this Spring Thrift Haul. As ever, my lovelies, thank you so much for taking the time to spend the time with me here in my little cottage by the sea. I hope that wherever you are in this crazy old world that you're taking care of yourself, and I shall see you very soon. Till next time, bye.